Everyone, welcome back to It Takes a Village. My name is Jenny Schultz-Thomas, and I'm your host. It's been such a wild ride the last few months, just thinking about a new year, celebrating Advent, Christmas, being on break, and then coming back to this really kind of slow time. So it's great to be here with you. How are you doing, Sarah?
I am doing well. I am glad to be kind of back in the structure of things. I realize this is like the circle back week, the first week after the holidays. So it has been a little hectic, but I feel like after this week, we do get into more of the deeper wintering feeling.
Yes.
And then get to slow down a bit.
Yeah, exactly. I know several school districts are starting back to school this week. My kids went back on Monday. And they're barely getting up out of bed on time,
Yes.
like, oh, it's so hard to wake up. So, yeah, we are definitely circling back. And, yeah, it's exciting to kind of get into the routine as we, both work, home, and all the things. On that note, it's sort of getting back to basics. We started talking about we wanted to start off slow. And, I mean, for me, going on break and reading a lot, slowing down in general, spending time with family, was just a great reminder that we need to be gentle with ourselves as we approach a new year, knowing that the world wants us to accomplish everything and set resolutions that change the world, and all that's great, but be gentle with ourselves and start small. So we talked about Adrienne Marie Brown's emergent strategy and her great concept, small is all, small is good. So we wanted to talk and dive into different ways that we encounter the invitation, right, to do that. So lots of things to talk about today. Do you want to jump in talking about your thoughts on small is all, small is good, and where you are with that?
Yeah, I think it's just really inspiring for me and helps me to feel like I can do something, right? Like sometimes it just feels like we're up against these huge dilemmas in our culture, in our society, and what can one person do about it? But I appreciated, I think in your sermon on Sunday, you talked about like the flocks of starlings and how they travel together, and that whole formation is called a murmuration. And it's so cool to learn about it. It's really based on they're all responding to the birds around them, like right next to them. And so if one gets them going, this is my understanding.
Yeah.
People are really into this. I might be a little bit off. But one they start and then they direct each other. But it's not as though they are operating in one vast mind. It's each individual action. It nudges the one next to it and affects them, and then they make like these huge, beautiful formations. Like you can Google or get a YouTube clip of murmuration of starlings, and it's beautiful. So beautiful. So just that idea that what we do makes an impact on our neighbor, and then what they do makes an impact on their neighbor, and so on and so on. You know, kind of reminds me of the time when that whole pay it forward thing was kind of in the news, or it was popular.
Yeah. Buy a Starbucks for the car behind you.
Right. Which you can still do,
exactly.
You know, it's like we don't talk about it quite as much, but yeah, certainly our actions, whether kind or not kind, make an impact on the people around us. And then that can kind of, carry on through as a ripple effect. And so the idea that we can do good things and make a positive impact and, in the realm of justice and peace and love and kindness is really, it's like, okay, I can do something that feels good.
Yes, exactly. That interconnectedness, concept that she talks about too, Adrienne Marie Brown, reminds me of sort of like, well, she talks about the natural world, right? The starlings, but how the interconnectedness is so important. In the mornings, I go on the treadmill and watch, whatever, but there's this really great documentary. Anytime that it's just me and my family's not there, which I always watch some kind of like documentary about something because nobody else wants to watch with me. But there's one called Our Living World. And on the planet, I'm a sap for that. But it's so beautiful talking about how, it starts with reindeer, right? And how each action that every species or living thing takes as part of their place in the world has this giant ripple effect. It's like the reindeer, and then you see, who are running around, and there's a new reindeer born, and that reindeer has to find their legs. And then here, the wolves are coming over the horizon looking, and it's just this, how these species interact, and also how the wolves drive the reindeer, who are runners, right? That's one of the biggest things, that they are really, really fast. So the wolves chase the reindeer, and meanwhile the reindeer are trampling down the snow, which becomes a mirror effect to the universe, which puts back heat, so that then that heat can go to the oceans and create this amazing interconnected way of taking care of the global earth. And so there's so many great examples to think about paying it forward. But I think what I always take from the emergent strategy from Adrienne Marie Brown, and from so many other amazing thinkers who are talking about the natural way that we should kind of live into the ecosystem, is that if there's one alteration or one species, right, decides that our hierarchical, power or opportunity to exploit the other is more important than the interconnectedness and the whole, then we throw that entire ecosystem out of sync. And that's kind of what our species has done, right? And so I think this deep invitation to say, what does it mean to pay it forward? Well, it means to know and understand our place, right, in our own little, our family, our cell at work, or whatever kind of place that we are taking up in the world. So yeah, I think it's super inspiring to think about how we even do this on an emotional scale, right? Because if we think about, leaning into our own place and imagining and asking questions, well, how do I show up? Who am I and where am I in this world? We also have to first take care of ourselves, right? And small is all is a great way to start. Because again, it's January, and we should be making these resolutions about, I should look like this model on the front of this magazine. I should be on this diet. I should have this. I should whatever. But really, we should just be embracing self and starting there. How are ways that you have experienced kind of emotional health? And we talked about too, like we're in this season of dark and cold, so it can be hard to find our natural practices. But how have you started, or how do you tend to take care of yourself emotionally during these seasons of winter coming?
Right. Yeah, I mean, the isolation can definitely play a factor as we are feeling like it's cold. We snuggle up inside. That feels good to do, but then sometimes we find ourselves separated from one another. And thankfully, certainly a great benefit of technology is being able to stay connected. And it's so easy to reach out to someone. I mean, we still have that expression of like the 100-pound phone or whatever to reach out for help. But in terms of being thoughtful and being able to let someone know that they've crossed our mind, I often think, if you think of someone that maybe you haven't thought of for a while, that could be the Holy Spirit kind of planting that idea in your mind of maybe they'd like to hear from you, or maybe they're going through something, and that's a way that you can reach out and support them, even though you don't even realize it till you do it. And so, it's so much easier just shoot someone a text, and you don't have to necessarily make a long phone call, just to say, hey, I thought of you this morning. How are you? And to reach out. And I think that's just like, speaking of small, that's a tiny way that can really make a big impact to let someone know you're thinking about them, and then to kind of re-engage and see what's going on with them.
Yeah, it's so powerful too, to be on the receiving end of something like that. When someone, like my best friend who's in Colorado, she asked me, she's like, well, what would be, in this time, we were talking about pre-election, and I was like, in that losing my mind, what's happening, the world's falling apart, and this is awful. But she's like, what would be helpful, as you're kind of facing these things and thinking about these questions? And I was like, I don't know, and she's like, what if I just send you a text that says like a quote or whatever? And that is, I'll get these little errand texts, and it's like, oh my God, and this makes me smile and laugh, because I'm remembering how like completely over the top dramatic I was, we were talking about these issues, but how also just that brings a smile to my face, and it's a reminder. It's like, like even just getting small is good, right? Just take care of, step one. But I love that you're mentioning, so often we don't listen, or there's so much noise that you can't really hear that spirit nudging. But right, if someone randomly comes into your mind, or you see something, you think of someone, it's like, sort of like, what can hurt, right? If somebody comes into your mind and you think, oh, I'm going to reach out to them. Sometimes we think, oh, I haven't talked to them in so long, or oh, I can't call them, or, oh, what if, and it's, it's sort of that take the first step and just kind of send the text. And then what could happen? That they are surprised to hear from you.
Right.
It's so powerful, but it can be really intimidating if you
Yeah.
haven't connected in a while, or maybe you're feeling isolation yourself.
Yeah.
But that first step, and then you send that text, you feel great, and then they send a smiley back or something, and all the things that you thought, right, were clouding your mind, are just, they dissipate. It's like, yes, connection is life.
Yes. And I'm going to commit on the podcast to reach out to my friend Nicole, because I feel like the opposite thing, if we don't connect for a while,
Yes.
and then we are like, oh, I said I was going to call her back and I never did. And now I really never did.
Yes, right.
And so I'm just going to keep never doing that. But the only way to break that cycle is to do
just
it.
to do it.
Right. So
Yes.
I'm going to send her a little Marco Polo and just say hello.
Yeah.
And, I think I keep trying to bite off more than I can chew, of like setting up these Zooms with her, whatever.
Yes.
But it's like, it's better to just at least do a thinking of you, and I'm so sorry we haven't been in touch, than to let it go any longer.
Oh, that's great. I mean, I think that is hard, because so often it's the self-care. It's that you want to. You do the Zoom, or the hey, let's call at this time. We do the same thing, and Erin's in a different time zone, and we plan it. It's like we have this 2-hour window, and because you're doing so many other things, or, oh, my kids are going to be here, oh, I've got to whatever. But then when you actually commit to it, you're so great. It's so great that you needed that. You
Yes.
needed the time to connect with your friend, and your family is fine. Your kids can go cook their own dinner, right? Especially your teenage kids.
They can really cook.
Right? But yeah, it's really saying you deserve that.
Yes.
Like, you
Yeah.
need to be on the receiving end of that great friend, right?
Right.
So it's hard that's like self-care. What do we need? We need to connect with our friends.
Yep.
We need to set time apart. So we will ask you, Sarah, the whole
Okay.
village is going to ask you next week, did you call or text your friend, Nicole, right?
Okay. I'm going to do it.
That's right, because it doesn't have to be complicated, but we can overcomplicate everything, right?
Sure.
In life. It's like, oh my gosh, the problems are too big. I don't have enough time. There's so many things that get in our way. But when we start small, we realize that, like, time, we're going to have a lot more of it tomorrow and the next day and the next day.
Yes.
Just sort of do it. Another idea is to kind of create a habit of naming your emotions. I mean, you can think of the Brene Browns of the world, but just thinking about how things can be, I always think of Nelson Mandela and the captivity of the mind kind of concept, but things can be much bigger for us, the angst or the fear or any of the things, until we actually name kind of what they are. And sometimes even we project onto current moments things that we borrow from past moments, right? And so leading up to, it can be as simple as calling your mom, when it's been 2 weeks, or seeing someone at the school that you're like, oh, that parent, just drives me crazy, or, oh, I haven't volunteered at the PTO. And so you have these things and you think it's going to be so awful. If you just name those, right, you don't allow those emotions to define your reality, right? So just saying, gosh, I feel anxious about this. My wife is so great about this. I remember kind of learning this practice from her like 20 years ago or something. And I would find it so interesting. She would just say, I'm feeling anxious about something. I don't know what it is. And then we would just talk it out. And so I learned that practice from her, because I'm not a super anxious person. But when you don't even know, she would just know she's kind of feeling funny. And she would say, I'm not sure what it is. And we would talk about it. And she goes, okay, yeah, that helps. Even if it wasn't something big, it was, I think it was just whatever this performance I have to do. And now I feel great.
Yeah.
But yeah, it can be just a simple little 2-second thing. Hey, Sarah, I feel nervous about whatever.
Right.
Yeah, talk it out.
Yeah. And you give someone else the chance to support you and kind of even like co-regulate with you, because that if you are anxious but you're sharing it with someone who's not anxious, and they can hold that not anxious presence and invite you to just kind of think out loud about what might be going on. I feel like that is like taking like a big balloon that's full of all this tension and letting the air out. And just being able to name it and not be alone in it is so huge.
Yes, that's a great metaphor too. Like the balloon. I remember talking with a therapist when Sage was like 4 or 5 about anxiety, and he was like, if you take them out to, it was like, you could do one of these things or talk about as metaphorical experience. Take them out to a hallway, like a stairwell, in a building, and put a whole bunch of balloons in there and say, imagine if all those balloons were all your worries and they went to the top of the building, and what would happen if all the air went out and at the top of the building they filled it. And the idea is that nothing really happens. All the air goes out and then they fall to the bottom. And then the next time you're really worried, they'll fill back up with air. But what really happens? Nothing. Like they just hit the ceiling and then, and it's this idea that it's okay to say that you have these worries or you're afraid about something, and you can even see it, and it rises up, and then you talk about it and you let it out, and it just goes back down. And it doesn't pop, it doesn't hurt anyone. But yeah, that naming your emotions or not letting your emotions define your reality. That's something, one of a best practice I learned a long time ago. But your current reality, you either allow the world or others to project on, and then you own it, right? And then you're blowing up that balloon every time. You're like, oh. Or your current reality is like, wait a minute, I'm right here in my body. And then you talk about that reality, and then it deflates. So whatever it is, right, for people, I think that can be one of those helpful social, emotional kinds of things that we talk about and teach, but then how do we emotionally have a practice that helps us, get through these isolation moments when we don't have friends all the time around?
Yes, certainly.
The spiritual health is something that we talk about a lot, maybe not always explicitly, but most of the things that happen in life we're mind, body, and spirit.
Yep.
But intentionally working on spiritual health can sometimes feel ambiguous, or what does that even mean? People will like, well, I want to grow spiritually, or I need some spiritual growth. What does that really mean? Well, first of all, attending to your own spirit, right? Listening to kind of what's going on. And if you don't have a spiritual practice, in the winter, it can be, as it gets dark, it can be that much more important to name for yourself and carve out time. And that can be so simple too, right? You don't have to wake up and do a Bible study, which you could, and that would be great too. But you could simply light a candle, while you're cooking dinner, put on some music. We always put music on and do whatever, but light a candle or just have a 5-minute time to yourself. So a lot of ways to engage yourself spiritually, but sometimes we think you have to be, meditating for 30 minutes or doing yoga practice and I think those should factors, it's sort of don't shit on yourself,
right? But
just take a small is all approach.
Yes.
What kind of things do you recommend, or what have you done, Sarah, that feel important to you?
Yeah, I think small amounts of meditation or centering prayer, not the 30-minute sessions. I know, I've studied Father Thomas Keating's contemplative prayer, and he recommends 20 minutes each in the morning and the evening. I think I've done that one day in my whole entire life, on a retreat with other people.
Yeah, right.
But even to be able to sit and have 3 minutes and have a sacred word. And honestly, my sacred word has become here, which is sort of shorthand for here with God. And imagining I am here in God's presence. God is here with me for these 3 minutes, putting away the phone, not multitasking, and really thinking of my spirit is being filled by God. And I think too, another spiritual practice is just to bring God into so many things that we think often are separate from God. I think about Paul talking about praying without ceasing. And, you think about that and you're like, how is that possible? Do so many other things in a day. How can I be praying the whole time? But I feel like bringing God into the things that sometimes historically people have said, oh, God doesn't care about that. I just take that expression out of your vocabulary.
Yes,
God
exactly.
cares about everything. And so from, the smallest task to the biggest crisis of life, we can bring God into it and feel like we're not alone. We're always being guided, and we're always being accompanied through all that we do. And even the smallest topics of life, God is there too.
Yeah, I think that's so true. And it certainly has been probably the most important and impactful thing in my life as a young child. And just through adulthood is learning and knowing that God is always with and within. I used to lay in my bed. I'm 6 years old, 9 years old, and have these journals that I still have, and I would write all of these things. Dear God, today I did this, and my friend Monica got really mad at me, and this practice of knowing when I felt alone, because a lot of, childhood kind of drama and trauma around like moving a lot and all the things, it was like, I just turned right there. And of course I grew up with like a stringent, like Southern Baptist mom who's like, hey, we're going to Sunday school and all the things every week. So I was thankful for that early understanding that God is always with me. And that has remained, throughout. I think what you're talking about reminds me of Brother Lawrence, the practices of the presence of God. He's talking about washing the dishes and scrubbing the floor, and that it's not about God's, having you do these menial tasks. It's knowing that God is with you and delights in you no matter what you're doing. And so it's acknowledging that you are never alone. God is always with you. So if you're doing your, writing your emails that you don't want to write, or you're, doing the thing that you love, it's the acknowledgement that God is with me. God is within me. And then when you acknowledge those things, I think the joy and the hope and all the things that radiate, right, from you, that's sort of this interconnectedness, that Spirit is weaving us together and really showing that we belong to each other, because we all belong to God. So even, when we're like, oh, make everything so hard, or we think we know everything, or all, it's like, if we just boil down to this centering on that we don't have to do any of those things. We don't have to pray all day long. We simply need to acknowledge that we are not our own, right? And that Spirit is always working and shining through us. So I'm glad that you're talking about that. I think it can be intimidating sometimes to think, oh, I don't know how to pray. I mean, how many times have we had people come and say, Jenny, I really don't know how to pray.
Right.
And it's, Parker Palmer, prayer is life, right? Ask the questions, and the questions that God shows up in those questions. So, I mean, spirituality is so important to us. Expressing gratitude, is another way that we can be spiritually healthy, showing that we aren't alone and that others are contributing to our lives. That can be the gift that keeps on giving. What about physical health? I think that can be even more important during the winter.
Yeah.
Like, how do we take care of our bodies?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I'm a big exercise person. I just not to put myself down. I mean, I look like it, but I do like to exercise. And I always say that because I like to change the way I feel. I mean, exercise can really change your mood. And I just am a person who tends to wake up I don't spring out of bed and just think like, oh, here I go, I'm going to take on the day. I do get up really early, but I often have to kind of like coax myself into a better mood for whatever reason. And so I'll often leave for the gym. And then by the time I get back, I've moved my body, I've listened to music while I work out, I've, had coffee, and I just feel like, okay, now I feel like myself again. Whatever, Eeyore got out of bed with me.
Yeah.
So I think moving and sometimes just like, asking your body, like, what do you want to do today? It doesn't always have to be, pounding the pavement in a run or lifting big heavy weights. Sometimes that feels amazing and very empowering. And other times it's like, I'm just going to like go cycle for like 10 minutes on my little, bike in the garage or whatever, and just move my body. And if I don't feel like doing more than that, then that's okay. I did those 10 minutes.
Yeah. Well, I think what you just said is the most important thing is what is my body asking me to do? What does my body need from me? If we can be out of body sometimes, like not connected to your deep self, then you can like race your body into the ground, right? Without supporting it. So it can be simple, wake up in the morning and stretch. I stretch every morning in the bed, probably because I'm getting older, right? It's like, oh, I need to stretch before I walk and pull something. But every morning it can be such an easy, couple of minutes of stretching, and sort of it reminds you that whatever the day holds, right, that it's your body is the one thing that you have that's going to carry you through. So take care of it, give it the time it needs. But then, I think physical health can be connected to your emotional and spiritual. So if you're taking a walk, even if you're doing your steps at your work, whatever it is, be mindful as you are doing those. Like if you're just going to walk to get your lunch, you're walking down the hall to connect with a coworker, be connected to what your physical body is doing, right? Know and be aware, whether it's aware of your breath, aware of the steps you're taking, aware with gratitude that your body is able to mobilize you, right? And if your body isn't mobilizing you, right, with your legs, maybe your body is the energy that your body is using to get you from one place to another. to, feed yourself, all the things. It's showing gratitude for your body.
Mm-hmm.
That can go a long way in feeling kind of burned out or tired.
Yeah.
Because so many people, like, it's the, an afternoon, you're like, oh my gosh, another cup of coffee actually doesn't help.
Yeah.
Right? It kind of go the other way, take some tea. But talk to your body and say thank you. Gosh, you've, birthed some babies, you've done some things. Whatever it is, like, say thank you to your body and just recognize that it's doing work and you are that work, right? But you also want to show the gratitude for what your body can do.
Yeah.
I think that's a real gift, right?
Right. And I think too, like, as you were talking, I was thinking about, just for different times in our lives or different levels of ability that we might have. And sometimes if we are in a time where we can't move our bodies in the ways that we want, we can ask for help to have, whether it's massage or healing touch, or just say, like, can you rub my back to someone that's in our life. Being able to have someone connect with our body when we can't necessarily generate the same energy that we might have from a time when we ran or did whatever we used to do with our bodies. I feel like that's another way that we can connect, or even self-massage, right? Like, you can, massage your temples, like all these things. It just shifts your awareness of what is happening with your body. And like you were saying, it reminds us that our bodies are good and our spirits exist in these bodies.
Yeah.
And without that, we aren't living if we are not in a body.
Yeah.
It's just kind of the way it is for a human.
That is exactly right. That is the shell that we have. And I think that's being connected to our physical bodies, and taking care. So much of Western medication is like reactionary versus preventative, right? So so many of the things that people do, I'm fine, and then something's wrong, and so then you might go to the doctor, and then they fix the thing that's wrong with something, instead of realizing that we have so much power over our health. And being connected to a practitioner who actually touches our bodies is really important, right? So a holistic person maybe, or like you're talking about, just someone you care about who's connecting to your body, so that you remember, what it means when something isn't right. Because we can be very disassociated from our spiritual, emotional selves and our physical self. I think to that end too, like this past week, the Surgeon General talked about alcohol, made like this big announcement on, as we know, but even more critically, that alcohol can really, really contribute to so many different cancers. And one of the ways that we, don't take care of our bodies is through substances, right?
Yeah.
And overuse of substances, which have so much to do with our emotional and spiritual health. So I would say too, like, sometimes just cutting back on whatever it is, like if you're drinking or using other kinds of substances, it can be really helpful to cut back on those, to give your physical body, right, the opportunity to connect more emotionally and spiritually. So whatever it is for you, I think just naming the thing that one thing, maybe even one thing a week that you would like to, or one thing a day that you'd like to do that takes care of your physical body. There's so many ways, right, that we are encouraged to make a difference, to show up in the world, to take care of ourselves and other people. But I think what we're really hoping to do, in this starting off this new season gently, is to just kind of let go of all the shoulds and tell yourself that you are enough, that you can make a difference in your own life and in the world just by smiling and waking up. And, that's huge, right? And knowing that you play an important role in this much bigger ecosystem. But don't feel like you're hearing from Sarah or I today, like, oh gosh, I need to add all these things or do all these things. We really hope that anyone in our village or in your village hears that you are already making a difference simply because of who you are. And, making a difference means being connected, right? We want you to make a difference in your own life, which means you need to hear from that friend. Text that person who's going to be your cheerleader, who's going to say, like, you're awesome, you can do this. If Sarah or I could be that for you, please reach out to us. But yeah, interconnectedness, I think, is equally as important as the small is all, small is good.
Yes.
So we hope to see you back here next week on It Takes a Village. Take care of each other. Work to take care of your spiritual and emotional and physical health. And know that we are doing this together and that we belong to each other. So we hope to see you soon.